Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Sportscaster and her son. We are back off of hiatus after a few months or so as life got pretty crazy with Jason graduating from college. I'm Peggy. I'm the sportscaster at ESPN Chicago, longtime sportscaster. And my co-host is my son, Jason, who is also a sportscaster. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Mom. Feels so good to finally be able to say that. Yeah, I am a sports and news reporter here at WIBW in Topeka, Kansas. I'll be based out of Manhattan this fall, where I'll be covering all things Kansas State Wildcats. Super exciting for me because I just covered the Big 12 Conference for 4 years in college. I followed the Big 12 Conference for more than 4 years in high school and beyond that, growing up a TCU fan. And so now to be able to cover the conference full-time, paid, everything, I'm super excited about it and can't thank you enough, Mom, for everything you've done to help me get here, and to all the viewers at home who have been supportive and who have played even a small role in this. It's exciting going from step to step in my career, and so very thankful for what's helped me get here.
So for almost 5 years now, our podcast, The Sportscaster and Her Son, has been about a mother and son talking
6 years.
sport.
Over 6 years.
I can't keep track. I was saying 4.5 years. It's 6 years. You were a junior in high school. I do remember that.
Yeah.
And this has always been about us bridging the generation gap and giving a mother and a son, a teenage son at the time, things to talk about. And sports was it. Well, now you're a young adult and I'm just getting older, and I'm back in the business at ESPN Radio. You just entered the business in Topeka, Kansas. And it's fun to go on year 6 like this. Let's kick it off now, Jason, by talking about the NBA draft. This was one of the craziest drafts I have ever remembered. There was no consensus as to who was going to go number 1, who are the top 10 picks, who are the top 15. Teams could not agree from one player to the next. But one thing that was interesting was what the Bulls did.
Of course, Bob. Interesting is a good way of putting it. I don't know if I would call this one of the most surprising drafts, or I forget the word that you used. I'd say maybe more talent devoid or thin drafts. This was a product of just a draft that doesn't have a clear future franchise player in it. Now, that's not to say that some of the first round picks, especially some of the lottery guys, won't go on to be all-stars. There's an average of 3 to 4 every NBA draft. There's going to be at least one this year. What the Bulls did in the first round was super exciting. They had a projected top 5 pick, Buzelis, a kid from the Chicago area. He went to Hinsdale Central High School his freshman year. He fell into their laps at pick 11. This was a kid who was mocked to Detroit at 5 throughout just about the entire pre-draft process. Detroit went a different direction, as they tend to do on draft day, and Buzelis fell into the Bulls' hands at 11. Mom, this is a 6'9" wing who can handle the ball like a point guard. He handled the ball like a point guard in high school. You hope he can handle the ball like a point guard down the line in the NBA. But this is a toolsy, long, exciting kid in Buzelis, who I'm just so happy the Bulls were able to get their hands on.
Okay, so when you looked at the weaknesses on the Bulls for the last couple of years, they have needed a rim protector and they have needed three-point shooting. So the fact that they didn't go and get either one right now, does that mean they are rebuilding and they are now going young?
Well, those would be the weaknesses on the court. Now, if you looked at the Bulls roster, that wasn't a championship caliber, a deep playoff run caliber roster. What the Bulls are trying to do now is they're trying to invest in positional length and in sort of unicorns at their positions. Josh Giddey, who they acquired from the Thunder, he's a 6'9" true point guard, and he handles the ball better than most anyone in the NBA. He's a fantastic facilitator. Josh Giddey is the exact type of player that the Bulls are looking to build around, and who better to pair him with than a fellow 6'9" ball handler who plays more like a wing. Like you said, Mom, the Bulls needed that three-point shooting. Buzelis did not shoot the ball well from 3 in the G League, but he projects as a guy who you hope can shoot in the upper 30% from three-pointer. The upper 30% from 3 down the line in his career. The Bulls are drafting Buzelis for what they hope he's going to be in 5-6 years, not for who he's going to be next season, the season after that. they are rebuilding, Mom. They're going to likely trade DeMar DeRozan, sign and trade him if possible. They'll trade Zach LaVine for the first offer that comes across the table. And they already traded Alex Caruso. So what the Bulls need to be focusing on doing, what they appear to be focusing on doing, is one, stockpiling toolsy players with good length at their position, because that's the direction that the NBA is moving in. And two, hopefully start stockpiling 2025 draft picks, because next year's draft looks like it's going to be a really, really strong one, especially at the top.
Okay, so they do have to protect that first round pick, because it was also involved in their recent trade. Was it the last couple of years? So that's an interesting point that you bring up. But back to one of their other young players, not only having Io and having Kobe White, but there's another big man that they have on their roster that may want too much money right now. Are they going to be able to re-sign Patrick Williams?
Yeah, so they've already extended Patrick Williams, actually. He's going to get 4 years at about $95 million, which might seem like a lot of money for a player who hasn't reached his peak yet with the Bulls, but he's still a really young player. He is statistically one of the best three-point shooters at the power forward position in the history of the NBA, and so by that metric alone, you have a lot to build off of. Pat Williams is a fantastic defender. Now, when he is tasked with guarding some of the best players in the NBA, like Giannis Antetokounmpo or even Donovan Mitchell, of course he's going to look a little bit overtasked because he's still young and he is still learning. Patrick Williams is a player who the Bulls just invested in, and they need to invest in. I mean, they took him with the 4th overall pick in the 2020 draft. That was a weak draft like this one is, but there were still some diamonds in the rough, and Patrick Williams, I would say, has not reached his potential in a Bulls uniform yet. I know the staff agrees with that. The organization agrees with that if they just paid him that kind of money. But it is TBD what kind of player, what kind of role Patrick Williams is going to play on these rebuilding Bulls as a guy who fits a lot better as like a 3rd or 4th piece on a winning team, in my opinion.
Well, Jason, let's talk more about the Bulls draft pick. And I'm going to let you take over from here because you set up our interview with our guest today.
Yeah, Mom, thank you so much for handing it off to me. I'm very glad that we are joined by the head boys basketball coach at Brewster Academy, Jason Smith. Coach Smith, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And so, Coach, you coached Matas Buzelis, the Bulls' first-round pick, in high school when he was at Brewster for a span. Can you just, how would you describe his game to the average basketball fan?
Yeah, Matas's game really translates to the modern NBA. He has obviously tremendous perimeter size at 6'10". He's extremely versatile. He's almost like a point forward, so he can handle the ball. He can shoot the ball. He's an outstanding athlete. He's got a very bright future. If I'm a Bulls fan, I'm very excited about their draft pick.
And at what point in your time coaching Matas did you realize that he was going to go to the NBA? He's always been a highly rated recruit, but you personally, when was your moment where you were like, okay, this kid's going to play in the big show?
Even when we were recruiting him, it was during the pandemic. High school basketball in the state of Illinois was unknown. I don't think they were playing basketball. That's how we had the good fortune of having Matas transfer here during his 10th grade year. But even just watching him in those clips that he had from, going into his 10th grade year, so the summer leading up to his 10th grade year, you saw the enormous potential and upside that he had as a basketball player and ultimately an NBA prospect. So probably to answer your question in a roundabout way, I would say, really even before he stepped foot on campus, and then when he was here, very early, you could tell he had what the modern NBA is looking for in terms of perimeter size, how fluid he moved at that size. When you watch him on film, you would think that he's about 6'4", 6'5", because he moves so well. And then you see him in person and he's 6'10".
Wow.
Yeah, a good friend of mine played against Matas his senior year of high school, which was Buzelis' freshman year. And his quote, it's always stuck with me, that kid can do whatever he wants with the ball. Explain what that means when it comes to Matas.
Yeah, tremendous ball handler for his size. It's the way the NBA is going now. They want those 3-and-D wings, big wings, and Matas checks a lot of boxes that, frankly, I think Chicago's fortunate that he dropped to 11th. He's somebody that you could look back in years and say he might have been the most talented player in the 2024 NBA draft.
Coach, he passed up an opportunity to play college basketball. I think it's culturally, Lithuanian kids go pro. Like that's what they do. So that's not surprising, but he is really young. So what do you see he needs outside of needing to bulk up to NBA size, muscle-wise? What else do you see that he will have to really work on before he takes an NBA court?
The one thing that I've always, mentioned to Matas, and he'll laugh if he hears this, but I've always told him, if you're a 6'10" guard, you have to be able to defend those guys on the perimeter. So there are going to be times, even when he was in high school as a perimeter player, he would be guarding somebody who was, 6'1", 6'2". So I think as he matures and learns to use his length on the defensive end, understands how to play angles, that's the part of his game that certainly has improved since he was here, but only will continue to get better as he gets older.
I love when we talk to NBA scouts and scouts in any sport. They love when it's in an athlete's genes that they come from great stock. A dad played basketball. In Mata's case, not only did his dad play basketball, his mom was a collegiate athlete, and his grandmother was, I think, a professional athlete. She was one of the top Lithuanian handball players. I mean, he really comes from incredible athletic genes.
Yeah, and I think that showed in just his understanding of the game. Having parents who played at a high level, he understood how to play when he arrived here. As a sophomore, his sister is a Division I athlete. She plays lacrosse. His younger brother Vince is a tremendous basketball prospect himself. So the family is definitely very athletic and has some very talented kids. That's for sure.
There is a faction of NBA fans, followers who are going to look at any kid coming out of the G League and say to themselves, well, they didn't play against the highest level competition. Why should we buy into them in the NBA? But at Brewster Academy, you guys play against the top high school programs in the country. So tell Bulls fans a little bit about how Matas looked against that high level of competition in high school.
Yeah, even when Matas was here in grades 10 and 11, the league that we played in at that time was dominated by fifth-year students or postgraduates. So he was playing against 18, 19-year-olds as a 16-year-old sophomore. I think any NBA fan that also follows college basketball will understand that the G League is full of former high major superstars, that he played against on a nightly basis. So the competition, the coaching, the development he had this past year in the G League was comparable to any major college program. He was playing against, 22 to 30-year-old men in the G League, which frankly is as good of competition, if not better, than playing in any major Power 5 conference.
That is such a good point, honestly, with the former high major superstars that people don't talk about. Like, those G League rosters are a laundry list of names that people watched in college and in the NCAA tournament, and it's just such a good point that people don't talk about enough. The next thing that I have to ask is, at Brewster, there's a rich history of blue chip recruits, NBA players, outside of his talent level and how he looks the part on the court. What about Matas as a person makes him fit for the NBA?
I think a lot of kids I've seen over the years play basketball because they're good at it, not necessarily because they love the game. I think Matas truly loves basketball. A lot of kids play basketball for the attention that it can bring them, unfortunately. Matas is a kid that truly loves the game, and he would play on Pluto. He would play anywhere, Chicago. He's a hooper. He doesn't play to, make a living. He plays because he truly loves basketball. So he's going to continue to work just as hard now that he's in the NBA as he did when he was a 16, 17-year-old trying to be successful.
Coach, one of the things I've heard his game described as being very creative, that he is very creative off the ball. He's very creative how to use his body. Can you explain what you saw from him with how he is, quote unquote, creative in basketball?
He's a unicorn. He's a 6'10" guard. A lot of people, you can probably find, different experts, give him a position. Some have said power forward, some have said small forward, some have said shooting guard. He is the modern NBA player. He doesn't really have a position because of his versatility. And then when you combine that with his size at 6'10" and how fluid he moves and how athletic he is, he's truly one of one. He separates himself from a lot of his peers, and it's only going to continue to improve as he matures physically and gets older.
So since he is a unicorn, what current NBA players or college basketball players would you compare him to, since he's kind of one of a kind? Like, who is he a conglomeration of?
I've heard a lot of people in the past compare him to Lamar Odom. Big, 6'10", but can really handle the ball. Matas is an exceptional passer as well. He's got great vision. I think a lot of people, even when he was younger, professed him to be a point guard. He has point guard qualities. He has shooting guard qualities because he can really shoot the ball. And he has, forward qualities because he'll get on the glass and rebound. So the one comparison that I've heard over the years that really I think makes sense is Lamar Odom, just in terms of his size, his ability to handle and pass the ball.
That is a fantastic comparison, and that is one that Bulls fans should get very excited about. Coach, my last question that I have for you is Matas has a little bit of a reputation of being probably the most confident of the draft picks. Do you have any stories that can attest to that? Any experiences from being on the court with him for so long that can attest to his confidence and how much he believes in his game?
Yeah, I think that every guy that I've coached that has reached the NBA has that quality. Very confident, not cocky, not arrogant, but very confident in their abilities. I think that's what makes them successful and able to reach that level. I think we've been fortunate to have had 24 guys play in the NBA. It's one of the funny things is one of Matas's teammates his sophomore year here was Devin Carter, who went 2 picks after him in the draft. And they would play one-on-one basically every day. Devin at the time was a postgraduate, so he was, 18, 19 years old, whereas Matas was 16 and not physically as developed as he is now. And Devin often would get the better of him because of his physical maturity, but that didn't deter Matas from coming back the next day and wanting to really compete and get better than he did the day before. So again, every player that I've coached that's reached that level is always been very confident in their abilities, and I think that's what makes them successful.
It's interesting that you say that because if anyone doubts Matas, he seems to rise to the occasion, especially in the big moments, the spotlight events. He was Gatorade Player of the Year in New Hampshire. I was looking to see some of the other things. He was invited to Basketball Without Borders camp during the NBA All-Star Weekend, ended up getting MVP of the event, McDonald's All-American, consensus 5-star, top 10 recruit. This is a kid that seems to really rise to the challenge.
And again, I think that's the separators. That's why he went to the G League route. I've been telling kids as long as I've been coaching, the way to get better isn't, necessarily to, do drills all day long. It's to go to a gym where there are older, better players than you. I tell 16, 17-year-old kids now, find that gym in the summer that has, college players home or grown men that are more physical, and that's how you're going to see your game develop. And I think that's what Matas did by going the G League route. That's not something that should be overlooked because he was playing against, on his team, but also in the league against players that have had success at the collegiate level. And he wanted to challenge himself by playing against men every single day. And I think that's where you really saw his development take off.
Before we let you go, Coach Smith, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join the podcast, tell us about Modest's personality. Is this a kid that's all basketball? Jason was kind in saying that he's a very confident kid. We've heard that he's a trash talker, that he likes to talk on the court. What's his personality like?
He's very upbeat, very positive. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen him down or sad. He always has a smile on his face. You know, even when he's talking trash, he has a smile on his face when he's competing. So he's somebody that here in our community, he was very well thought of by the peers, whether they were teammates, classmates, teachers, and administrators and staff all really thought highly of him just because he is a really good person. His parents did a phenomenal job raising him. It's not easy for a 16-year-old kid to go, thousands of miles away from home and have success and acclimate so quickly like Matas did.
Coach Jason Smith from Brewster Academy, boys basketball coach. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Sportscaster and Her Son podcast. Hopefully we'll be talking about Matas for years to come in a Bulls uniform.
I hope so. Thank you for having me.
All right, Jason, how about some predictions?
Yeah, Mom, like we've mentioned, this is our comeback episode, and so I have had some predictions in the vault for a very long time. Actually, we have not recorded an episode since my Texas Longhorns played in the college football playoff, which is, one, pretty hard to wrap my head around, but two, means that I have to start off with this prediction. I'm going to say that Texas wins the national championship next year in college football. They return the best returning quarterback in the country, and they brought in great pieces on defense. Trey Moore, the edge rusher from UTSA, is an impact transfer who I'm really looking forward to watching. And they have one of the best receiving cores that I've ever seen from a college team between Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, Silas Bolden, Jonte Cook, and Ryan Wingo. A lot of mouths to feed in Austin, but they're all going to be full after this season when Texas takes home the national championship.
All right. Prediction number 2.
Prediction number 2. I think Dansby Swanson's days in Chicago are numbered. There have been talks that of that free agent shortstop class from 2 years ago, he has went on to be the Carlos Boozer. Actually, Tyler Aki was the one who tweeted that out. Last night, he said that Trey Turner was the LeBron James of the shortstop class of 22, and that Dansby Swanson has been the Carlos Boozer. I completely agree with that. Carlos Boozer played about 6 or 7 years on the Bulls, and I would be shocked, though, if Dansby Swanson plays that long with the Cubs. They have good prospects in the middle infield. Kevin Alcantara is a guy who I think that is going to force the issue pretty soon to get up to the big leagues in the next year or so. And Dansby Swanson just hasn't been good enough. He hasn't been good enough with the bat. He hasn't been good enough with the glove. He hasn't been the leader, the emotional force that you are expecting for a World Series champion to play like at shortstop. And so I am going to say, if not at this trade deadline, certainly by next spring training, Dansby Swanson will be in a different uniform playing shortstop.
Wow. All right. And your final prediction, number 3.
My final prediction, the NHL draft happened last week. I cannot name or pronounce the name of the Blackhawks second overall pick off the top of my head, but the Blackhawks did make some fantastic signings over the last few days, Tyler Bertuzzi, the winger, being one of them. And I think that surrounding Connor Bedard with the right pieces as he starts to come into his own as one of the key players in the NHL is so important. And with that being said, I think the curse will be lifted and the Blackhawks will finally be back in the postseason next spring. My fingers are crossed for this one because after watching the Stanley Cup playoffs and that fascinating series between Edmonton and Florida, I just cannot wait for Chicago to be graced with playoff hockey again. Mom, your thoughts?
Okay, well, my final thoughts, I'm going to make a prediction. This is your first job away from home. I am going to predict that we will hear from you every single day, that you are on the air telling us what you are doing, which is really, really cool. Because my first on-air job, when I was working at ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut, I filled in at a Hartford television station in Hartford, Connecticut. And I filled in on Thanksgiving and on Christmas for the lead sports anchor, Rich Coppola, who was taking the holiday off. And so I filled in my first ever time on the air. I was awful. It was not good. And then my second and third times on the air, third or fourth times, I should say, was in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Again, I was hired to fill in for the lead sports anchor who was going to cover the Pirates in training at spring training. And so I drove from Connecticut to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and I worked at a TV station that did the ABC affiliate news at 10:30, and then did the Fox affiliate news at 11 or 11:30. I can't even remember. And I did not have anywhere to stay. I talked myself into a cheap motel across the street by saying I was with the TV station. And lo and behold, when the news director, who I will not say his name because I still remember it, when he found out that I had used the TV station's name and call letters at the motel across the street, lo and behold, he did not pay me. And so, he said, well, since we had to pay for the motel, that was it. And so those were my first 4 days ever on air getting paid. So I am hoping that your first 4 days are better than my first 4 days went. And but you know what? You never forget them. So have fun, Jason. Enjoy the ride, and welcome to the world of sportscasting.
Thank you so much, Mom. Those stories are awesome. I actually hadn't heard the Johnstown, Pennsylvania one, so that's pretty good. And honestly, that's right up your alley, using something like that to get a free room.
And the news director's desk was filled with, those stuffed toys that you get with the claw in the machine that you like put quarters and quarters, and you keep trying to use the claw to get. It was filled with them. So
I'm going to reserve judgment in case this man is still a news director at a station that I applied to one day. And if he is, and if he's listening, I would do a great job regardless of what you thought of my mom.
Oh my gosh, stop it. All right. Our thanks go out to ESPN Chicago for producing this podcast for us and making it available on the ESPN Chicago app. Don't forget to check us out there, as well as our YouTube channel. You can see the video version on YouTube. You can listen to us wherever you get any of your other audio and podcasts. Jason, we'd like to thank everybody, right?
I'd like to thank everybody for listening and for watching. As always, if you like what you see or hear, you know how you can check us out. The ESPN Chicago app is the best place to do so. YouTube is nice if you want to watch the video. Otherwise, just about anywhere you get your audio, you can get the Sportscaster and her son on your phone. Mom, it's been a pleasure. Can't wait for the next one.
And don't forget to follow us on Twitter X at TSAH Pod, the Sportscaster and her son pod, or at Jason Kinander, or at ESPN Peggy. Both of us are all over social media as well. And that's it for this episode. Thank you all for hanging with us 6 years now and counting. For Jason, I'm Peggy. We'll talk to you guys very soon. Thanks for joining us, everyone. So long.